Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here to provide you a scout report on the newly linked center back Radu Dragusin, the Romanian center back over at Genoa at the moment. And there has been some heavy links to Spurs agreeing, I believe, personal terms with the player and perhaps the agent as well, who's been very active, it looks like, sort of around sort of the media and everything. The agent's had a lot to say, kind of similar to like a Destiny Udogie type of agent. But it looks like Spurs could be leading the race. This isn't certain at all. I'm not going to say that the deal is done or anything like that, but things are sort of moving in the center back department quite quickly for Spurs. It seems to be sort of the choice between a Radu Dragusin or perhaps Jean-Claire Todibo. So I've decided to provide you guys with a scout report of Dragusin. So let me know, everybody, your thoughts on the player. Get in those comments down below. Do smash that like button for me, please. Does a massive favor us because this does take a bit of work. It takes a lot of effort to put in sort of the research as well as sort of put together all the graphics and everything that does make these sort of scout reports possible. So that would be an absolute help. But let's get into what Radu Dragusin could possibly bring to Tottenham Hotspur. Now, Dragusin is 21 years of age. His market value is around 30 million euros, and that's where I've gotten it from, I think, according to a lot of the different rumors, saying that Spurs are interested in bringing him in for around 25 million euros, but it looks like maybe Genoa could be holding out for something around the 30 million euro mark. He's played 61 matches in total for Genoa in his career so far for them, and in 2023, or the 2022-2023 season, he actually picked up a few goals and assists. In fact, I think it was actually 4 goals in the Serie B season, in this Serie A season so far. He already has, I believe, 2 goals and 1 assist so far for them. So it does look like Radu Dragusin can pull up with sort of a goal or an assist, and I think does mostly come from actually his sort of aerial ability and his sort of set piece threat, which we will sort of dive in later in just a second here. But when you look at some of his stats according to FB Ref, we can see that there are maybe some sort of confusing or maybe cause for concerns, but in a moment I will sort of try to maybe sort of put some context to all of sort of the stats and all sort of the things that maybe some people are slightly worried about when it comes to some of his stats according to FB Ref. But tackles and interceptions are in fact quite low when you compare him to all the different center backs around the Serie A, but when you actually look at sort of his one-on-one numbers, actually pretty impressive. He's actually been able to, I think, tackle 7 out of 8 dribblers so far this season, which actually puts him at a pretty high percentage of sort of one-on-one, challenging dribblers type of stat there. And he's actually decent as well at clearing the ball. He has plenty of clearances, ranks very high as well when it comes to center backs in the Serie A. In that department, blocks are quite low when you look at him compared to other center backs. But again, let's emphasize this, and this will be one of his biggest strengths. I think that will continue to come up here is his aerial ability. He's actually very good in the air. He's very powerful, very tall, I believe around 6'3", and his aerial is 1. It looks like he's winning at least over 3 per match, which is definitely pretty significant. And his percentage of aerials 1 is also quite high, nearly winning 70% of his aerial duels, which is also, again, very, very good comparison, or at least he ranks very well in percentile compared to plenty of other center backs around the Serie A. Ball recoveries and progressive passes are quite low. The one maybe cause for concern, at least to a lot of Spurs fans, what I've seen around Twitter and everything, is that they're not very impressed by some of his passing numbers, but I will try to provide a bit of context to that in just a second. And actually, funny enough, just to maybe point out once again that he might have some sort of aerial threat that really could be taken use of, is the fact that he actually has some decent key passes, and a key pass is a pass that leads directly to a shot on goal. And I'm going to surmise, or at least I'm going to guess, that some of those key passes had been maybe registered from either knockdowns or headers that he's maybe provided for somebody, and then they were able to register a shot on goal from there. So definitely some areas where certainly did not compare well to the rest of the center backs across the Serie A, but definitely others you would definitely say in sort of the aerial department, and also some sort of defensive areas like in clearances and percentage of dribblers tackled, that he actually compares very, very well to other center backs around the Serie A. So let's provide a bit of context as to who Radu Dragusin's even playing for. He's currently playing for Alberto Gilardino, who's, I believe, the current Genoa manager, just promoted them from Serie B last season, and they actually look to be sitting pretty comfortably in 12th position right now, 6 points from safety at this moment in time, despite only being recently promoted, and they are 5th in the league for non-penalty goals minus expected goals. So it looks like they've been actually a very clinical team so far, and have also been able to keep some of the goals conceded down as well. I think they have conceded some of the fewest goals, I believe, around sort of teams in their sort of area in the table, unless I'm mistaken, but they are not the most creative of teams, and this is why I would say some of the passing numbers and some of sort of the progressive passing numbers, some of the numbers that you would normally see from a very good center back on the ball, it's not really going to be found, I think, in this Genoa team. Because Radu Dragusin, from what I've seen from highlights and what I've seen from just his general game so far, is that he does seem quite competent on the ball. He's not in any way clumsy or a donkey or in any sort of regard in possession. But I would say that when you look at sort of his team and just how they play, they rank very, very low in a lot of different sort of creative numbers. So you have to look at maybe that as sort of a bit of context, because they are, in fact, the lowest in the league for shots taken and shots on target in this Serie A. They're fourth lowest for key passes, second lowest for passes into the final third, and fourth lowest for passes into the penalty area. So all those combined really do show that they do struggle to get it up the pitch. They struggle to even create chances for each other, which then again makes sort of their ranking when it comes to non-penalty goals minus expected goals so impressive, really, because they're not really creating all that many chances. And they're in fact also the lowest in the league for progressive passes, second lowest in the league for through balls completed, second lowest for shot creating actions, basically another way of, kind of fancily measuring, sort of chances created. And then also third and second lowest for touches in the attacking third and in the opponent's box. And finally, lowest for carries into the final third and touches in the opponent's box. So it really shows that Genoa, while sitting sort of maybe comfortably sort of lower mid-table, they haven't exactly been that creative going forward. And they actually sort of rely on very few moments, and they've been taking them very well so far this season. But if you were expecting him to have tons of really good progressive sort of numbers, it's just not possible, I don't think, really in this Genoa team at the moment, because of how they try to play, and also them just being a recently promoted team from the Serie B. They seem to be sitting very compact, very tight, and are maybe just sort of looking to maybe pick and choose their moments when to actually get forward and when to attack. They don't seem as sort of gung-ho or as risky as maybe other teams might be. So you're not going to get, in that sort of type of team or that sort of type of play style, a ton of progressive numbers when it comes to the passing department or really in possession. So I thought, again, I'd just sort of provide a lot of context earlier as to a lot of the stats that we will be looking towards and a lot of the stats that we will be looking at just sort of on surface, because I think with stats, you do need to provide a lot of context to how the team plays, where they are maybe in their table respectively, what sort of team they are in general. And I think that does sort of explain maybe why some of his stats could be slightly underwhelming. And when you look at his tackles and interceptions compared to someone like Jean-Claire Todibo, maybe not nearly as high, which is interesting. But you look at some of his other sort of defensive stats like clearances, aerials won, percentage of aerials won, and also as well sort of one-on-one ability when it comes to marking in terms of percentage of dribblers tackled. He's comparing very well to the other guy that we have been linked with so far this season, Jean-Claire Todibo. You look at ball recoveries, Jean-Claire Todibo is winning out there, and I would say especially the sort of possession department when it comes to progressive passes. He's so high there, Todibo, as well as passes into the final third is much higher than Dragusin. And that is because I believe Nice have been a much better team in sort of their own respective league than actually Genoa are. I do believe they have much better players to pick from. They've been actually as well one of the more solid defensive teams in the Liga this season, which then has given them that sort of foundation to be able to sort of build out from the back a bit more. And Todibo has been very central to that. But I think you, again, have to sort of provide this sort of kind of context to the two different teams that they're sort of playing for. And if you were to compare him to the guy that he might be filling in for, which would be a certain Christian Romero, you can see that actually, once again, he's comparing quite well when it comes to aerials won, clearances, percentage of aerials won, and even that one-on-one ability. But once again, you have to look at also the possession numbers, and a team like Spurs are just going to have far more of the ball and are going to have far more chances to try to create chances from their center backs, start moves from their center backs, than it is in this Genoa team. So he's, again, not going to really compare very well to someone like Romero, who has been probably one of the better center backs in the entire Premier League when it comes to building out from the back and starting moves and just being a very skilled and very technical center back in possession. Whereas Dragusin, from what I can tell from a seeing eye test, is actually decent on the ball, and actually for someone his age seems to have a lot of technical skill. But once again, I will sort of ram this home that the team he does seem to be playing for doesn't sort of emphasize or really grant him these sort of opportunities to maybe compare favorably to someone like a Christian Romero or someone like a Todibo when it comes to sort of in possession and technical numbers like this. And if we were to summarize some of sort of his strengths and weaknesses, I would absolutely ram home the fact that this guy seems to be very powerful and very effective in the air. And that's in two different ways. I think he's actually a set piece threat, it looks like, for Genoa. That's sort of reflected, I think, in some of the goals that he's been able to score clearly for them last season and actually so far this season. But also, as well, I must say, when it comes to also his own defensive area, when it comes to his aerial ability, because a lot of times he does look like he's the guy that sort of is usually responsible for clearing his lines and clearing, sort of the balls that are swung into the box into this Genoa team. He seems to be very brave when rising up for these headers, and just in general, just has a very sort of convincing clearance on most occasions when trying to clear it with his head. So what I would say is that his main threat, or at least his main sort of kind of strength, should I say, in sort of his ability so far, is that does seem to be a very powerful player in the air. And he also has decent positioning as well when sort of trying to clear his lines. He looks to always be in the right place at the right time from whenever I've watched him play. And also, too, I must say that when you look at sort of his marking and sort of his tracking of runners inside the box, he's not just letting guys just sort of run across him or anything like that. He does seem to track them. He does seem to follow them and does a decent job at either sticking his head in or sticking a foot in to make things more difficult for them. And also, despite being a very defensive and sort of, sort of low blockish type team, Genoa, I must say, in some of the highlights I was able to pick out from him is that he does a decent job in stepping out of the defense when maybe it is possible to try to win the ball and sort of gain possession back for them. So I would say he has a lot of strength to his game in trying to just shove off defenders and sort of bully them really to a degree, but also he has that sort of aggression to step out from the back line and win it for them to regain possession. So two things that I really would emphasize on his strengths from what I've been able to tell is definitely sort of his ability to clear his lines, just sort of get the ball out of the box when you are under pressure, but his aerial ability with that really does go well to it. And then just sort of his general positioning when it comes to tracking runners, who he might be marking. He has this sort of, nice intention, or this sort of anticipation really to, see danger before it really happens, or see a move before it really happens. And I would say he has a lot of aggression and strength to his game as well, which does seem to make him, pretty powerful defender. Maybe that's the word that we're sort of looking for here when trying to describe him. And when it comes to weaknesses, I'm not going to claim to really be an expert or anything on really Dragusin. Again, I just sort of tried to do my best here at sort of trying to, kind of do a lot of research from other people that might know more about the Serie A, especially maybe teams like Genoa than I do. But from what I've been able to gather from sort of the stats, the highlights, as well as sort of general sort of kind of just sort of rumors about him and what type of player he is, I would say that there's not a lot of weaknesses that I can really pick up on or highlight. Of course, everybody was so concerned about some of his sort of passing stats and everything like that. But once again, I will say I think that's more of a reflection of the team that he plays for than really actually the player that he is. I think he actually does seem to be a decent technical center back, especially for only being 21 years of age. And he looks to have an okay pass on him, looks to be able to try to pick out passes, and he has an okay switch of play as well. Looks to actually switch play a lot. And they are a team, again, that tries to go for much more long passes than they do sort of short passes to try to retain possession. So when I look at Dragusin, I must say, hard for me to really pick out any strong weaknesses of his, because I'm not going to claim to be a total expert on the guy. I've tried to do as much research as I can on him for you guys, but would say that he does seem to have, a lot going for him, especially when it comes to his defensive ability. And I would say, once again, I'm going to put fire or put some water on sort of maybe the fires that have been raised about maybe him being poor in possession in comparison to somebody like a Debo, just because I think has to do maybe more with the team that he plays for than actually his own technical ability. But everybody, let me know what your thoughts are on Radu Dragusin. I actually approve of this signing. I think this is sort of in that sort of department for Spurs where it sort of makes a lot of sense. Serie A has been sort of a league that we've been very successful with in the past, and I wouldn't say that Spurs are exactly going for the cheaper option as we've been accused of before. I actually think this is sort of a signing that maybe reflects a lot of good research, also maybe the work of the Don Paratici might have some hand in this, because it is sort of a former Juventus center back that was brought into Juventus when he was very young, Dragusin, so it could be the case that Paratici is well aware of this guy and has sort of recommended him to Spurs now that he's been having an all right season last season for Genoa as well as this season. So this sort of all makes sense in a lot of different ways for Spurs. Right-sided center back, very powerful, good in the air, somebody that would be very useful for us in set pieces, and just very young and probably willing to learn and willing to adapt to a different team that can actually bring out maybe more of his skills in possession and start to develop those a bit more. But what I can say is he looks to be a very promising center back, looks to be a lot to be excited about. about, and I wouldn't say actually that Spurs are exactly going for the cheaper option here, because you have to think about it too, right? Think about players like Udogi, Pat Matasar, Vicario, so many players that we've signed underneath Paratici that were under the 20 million mark, that were seen as at the time sort of cheap, sort of kind of signings by Spurs, but actually ended up being some of our better players in this whole squad or in this whole club. So I must say that let's sort of put some caution to some of the doubts and everything around this guy, because this does seem to be in line with what Spurs have actually been kind of good at, I would say, recently in terms of our own recruitment. But everybody, do me a favor, smash that like button. Do get your comments in down below. Your thoughts on Radu Dragusin, anything you might disagreed with, agreed with that I might have had to say, or any sort of extra information that maybe I should have brought up here that I missed in sort of my research and just sort of this presentation of the video. I will be seeing ya. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. And maybe, hopefully, welcome Radu Dragusin to Tottenham Hotspur.